Hello, my name is Professor James Skinner, and in conjunction with my colleagues Associate Professor Stephen Moston and Dr Terry Engelberg, we've conducted a number of research studies into the area of drugs in sport. These studies have examined both the use of performance-enhancing drugs and recreational drug use. The studies have been funded by the Federal Government's Sport Anti-Doping Program and the World Anti-Doping Agency. Our first study examined public perceptions of drug use in elite sport. For this study we interviewed just over 2,500 members of the public to determine their perceptions of elite athletes' behaviours around drug use. We found that approximately 25% of athletes, according to the public, were engaged in performance-enhancing drug use, and approximately 30% of athletes were engaged in recreational drug use. Overwhelmingly, the public believed that some form of sanction should be put upon athletes who engage in these type of behaviours. Our next study sought to get comparative data so we could look at it against our public perceptions research. For this study, we elicited the views of elite athletes and coaches and their views or perceptions around the use of drugs in sport. This study showed that only 19% of athletes believed their peers were engaged in performance-enhancing drug use, and just under 30% were involved in recreational drug use. Although the numbers are similar, the perceptions of athletes and coaches were slightly lower than that of the public. Although these studies were important, what they didn't tell us is why athletes engage in these type of behaviours. Our next study sought to understand this. For this study we interviewed and collected data from athletes that have been found guilty of drug use in sport. This information was then used to allow us to understand why athletes might engage in these behaviours and what strategies we could put into place to deter these type of behaviours in the future. We then decided to shift our focus to understanding why young elite athletes might engage in drug use in sport. This study was funded by the World Anti-Doping Agency and sought to understand these behaviours in young elite athletes while taking into account two critical detriments: moral development and participation in elite sport. From this study we were able to develop theoretical models about why athletes might cheat and why engage in the use of drugs in sport. Our final two studies are longitudinal in nature and are currently in progress. The first study aims to track the development of attitudes in a cohort of young elite athletes. It is a 3-year project and we are currently in the second year of this project. This study seeks to understand how attitudes are formed over time and what factors might change or influence those attitudes in young elite athletes. Our final study is a 2-year longitudinal study, and this study aims to understand how much knowledge athletes, coaches and support staff have of the use of drugs in sport. The data collected from these studies will be used to help shape future sport policy around the use of performance-enhancing drugs and recreational drug use in elite sport. In addition, the data will be used to develop strategies aimed to deter the future use of drugs in elite sport.